Picture a shipping container. It's sitting on a rain-slick dock in Hamburg.
Right, just waiting there.
Yeah, exactly. And inside that container, buried under all these crates of, like, industrial machinery, are highly specialized missile components.
And they're quietly waiting to be loaded onto a freighter, bound for North Korea.
Bound for North Korea. Now, if you're listening to this, I want you to imagine a German intelligence officer. They're sitting in a surveillance van, maybe a few hundred yards away, watching this exact container through a long lens.
Yeah, and they know exactly what's inside it.
Right. They know exactly where it's going, and they know the massive global security implications if those components actually reach their destination.
But here's the crazy part. Under the rules that have governed German intelligence for, decades, that officer can really only do a few things.
Yeah, they can take photos.
Exactly. They can take photos, they can write a really meticulous report, and they can send that report up the chain of command to the chancellor's office.
But if they wanted to, walk down to that dock, pop the lock on the container, and quietly smash those guidance chips with a hammer so they don't work anymore.
That would literally be a crime.
A crime. They would be prosecuted by their own government.
Yeah, it would end in a massive scandal. Because the German intelligence apparatus has been defined by that exact paralysis. They are basically librarians of secrets.
Librarians of secrets. I like that.
Well, it's true. They observe the world through this thick pane of soundproof glass. They can watch the fire happen, but they are legally barred from throwing any water on it.
But that glass is breaking. And that's why you are joining us today for this deep dive. We are looking into a massive paradigm shift that is essentially rewriting the DNA of European security.
It really is a historical moment.
It is. We got our hands on the details of this monumental 700-page draft legislation. It's currently moving through the German government, and it will fundamentally transform the country's intelligence agencies.
Right, from passive observation to active, lethal operational forces.
Exactly. And to unpack all of this, we are relying on the reporting and expert insights of Florian Flade. He's a national security journalist based in Berlin, works with the German public broadcaster WDR.
And he's been tracking these geopolitical shockwaves driving Berlin's policy shifts for a while now. His work is basically our roadmap for this whole deep dive.
Absolutely. So I want to welcome our expert to the show today. You always have this amazing talent for synthesizing these really dense geopolitical shifts into something we can all understand.
Well, thank you. What's fascinating here is that this isn't just a bureaucratic update. It's not something buried in some parliamentary subcommittee.
No, it's huge.
It's a psychological and historical turning point for an entire nation, giving an intelligence agency the legal mandate to actively sabotage a foreign adversary, to commit crimes, to conduct offensive cyber operations. These are capabilities that strike at the very core of Germany's post-war identity.
And I think we really have to start with that identity. Because if we don't understand the invisible chains these agencies have been wearing for the last 80 years, we can't understand why this 700-page document is causing such a seismic shift.
Right.
The German intelligence community doesn't just have rules. They have this deeply ingrained institutional trauma.
Yeah, the constraints on German skies are uniquely tight compared to almost any other Western democracy.
Yeah.
And that's not an accident. It's a direct, engineered response to two successive dictatorships.
The Gestapo and the Stasi.
Exactly. You literally cannot look at the modern German security apparatus without seeing the shadows of those two organizations.
Right.
The Nazi era showed the sheer industrialized horror of a state police force operating with absolute unchecked authority, monitoring, kidnapping, torturing, and executing political opponents.
It was absolute horror. And then right after that, the division of Germany gave rise to the German Democratic Republic in the East.
And with it, the Ministry of State Security, the Stasi.
And the scale of the Stasi's domestic surveillance is honestly still hard to wrap my head around.
It's terrifying. They turned neighbors, friends, even family members into informants.
Yeah. The psychological suffocation of knowing that, literally anyone you spoke to might be writing a report on your political loyalties?
It was an intelligence agency functioning as an omnipotent domestic police force. So the architects of modern democratic Germany looked at the wreckage of those two eras, and they just drew a very hard line in the sand.
Right. They created what's known in German constitutional law as the Trennungsgrundsatz.
Yeah.
I probably butchered that pronunciation, but it's the principle of separation.
You said it pretty well. So yeah, the philosophy is simple but ironclad. The police cannot act like spies, and spies cannot possess police powers.
So let's break down the mechanics of that separation for our listeners, because in today's world of hybrid threats, that handoff must be incredibly complex.
Oh, it is.
Like, say, a domestic intelligence officer working for the BFV, which is the agency that monitors threats inside Germany, say they uncover a terror cell building a bomb in a basement in Munich.
Right.
They can't just go kick the door down, can they?
They absolutely cannot.
Yeah.
Not under any circumstances. I mean, that BFV can tap the phones, assuming they have a warrant.
Right.
They can monitor financial transactions. They can run 24/7 surveillance on the basement itself.
Okay, so they can watch everything.
Yeah. But the moment they realize, oh, wow, the bomb is active and arrests actually need to be made, they hit a hard legal wall. They have zero executive powers.
Wow.
They carry no badges that allow them to detain citizens. So they have to formally pass the entire intelligence package over to the federal or state police forces.
So they just hand over a file and step back.
Exactly. And then the police have to assess the evidence, secure their own judicial authorizations, and then the police execute the raid. The intelligence agency is completely locked out of the kinetic action.
I mean, that structural firewall makes total sense when you're trying to prevent a secret police force from emerging.
Absolutely.
But the history gets so murky when we pivot from domestic monitoring to foreign intelligence. The BND, the Federal Intelligence Service handling foreign espionage, they were built on a foundation that seems to contradict that whole post-war pacifism thing entirely.
Oh, the origins of the BND are wild.
Yeah. According to the source material, the BND was essentially birthed by the Americans, specifically the CIA, using the remnants of Hitler's military intelligence.
The Gehlen Organization. Yeah. It's probably one of the most pragmatic and controversial compromises of the early Cold War.
Can you explain who Reinhard Gehlen was?
Sure. He was a major general in the Wehrmacht, and he specifically headed the Foreign Army's East Intelligence Section. His entire expertise was the Soviet military.
Okay.
So when the Third Reich collapsed, Gehlen saw the writing on the wall. He recognized that the alliance between the U.S. and the Soviet Union was going to fracture pretty quickly.
He knew the Cold War was coming before it even had a name.
Exactly. And he positioned himself perfectly for the fallout. He essentially went to the Americans and offered them his entire network, his archives, his personnel.
Just handed it all over.
Yeah. He argued that they were the only ones who truly understood the emerging Soviet threat.
So the CIA is looking at the Iron Curtain descending across Europe, and they just decide to ignore the ideological taint of this former Wehrmacht officer.
Yep. They handed him the keys to the new West German intelligence apparatus.
That is just, I mean, talk about cognitive dissonance. You have this terrified, newly formed democracy legally binding its domestic agencies with that principle of separation we talked about.
Right.
But simultaneously, they're allowing a former Nazi military intelligence officer to run their foreign spy network with almost zero oversight.
The contradiction is glaring. And for those early decades, the BND really operated in a legal gray area. There wasn't a comprehensive parliamentary law governing their foreign operations at all.
They were just out there doing whatever.
Basically. They functioned a lot like the early iterations of MI6 in the UK, shrouded in total official secrecy, operating purely on executive authority.
But the pendulum of German history never stays on one side for long.
Right, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
By the time the Cold War ended and Germany reunified, the public and the parliament were demanding accountability. So in the 1990s, the BND was finally codified into strict law.
And then the pendulum swung so far, it practically broke the clock, because then Edward Snowden happened.
Right, the Snowden leaks changed everything.
When those NSA leaks revealed the sheer extent of global surveillance, and specifically how much the BND was cooperating with American intelligence, the German public didn't just get angry, they completely locked down their own agencies.
They really did. The Snowden revelations triggered this massive parliamentary inquiry in Berlin. And the Federal Constitutional Court stepped in and handed down rulings that severely restricted the BND's operational latitude.
They essentially put them in a legal straitjacket.
Yeah. The agency was forced to become highly legalistic. Every single wiretap, every surveillance operation, every data collection effort, it all had to be scrutinized by lawyers to make sure it didn't violate the privacy rights of foreign nationals.
Which is a standard that very few other global intelligence services actually adhere to.
Almost none of them do.
I'm just trying to imagine the internal culture of an agency going through that kind of whiplash.
It must have been chaotic.
Right. You start as a Cold War proxy for the CIA, operating entirely in the shadows. And you end up as this massive bureaucratic organization where field officers probably spend more time consulting compliance lawyers than actually handling human sources.
That's a very accurate way to put it.
They deliberately hobbled their own security apparatus. Okay, so think about it like this. It sounds like Germany built a Ferrari, right?
A Ferrari.
But because of a history of terrible car crashes, they passed a law saying it can never go over 10 miles an hour or leave the driveway. It's safe, but it's not winning any races.
I love that analogy. And for a long time, the German political establishment was perfectly content driving that Ferrari at 10 miles an hour.
Really?
Yeah. Operating in a highly restricted, passive manner wasn't seen as a weakness. It was viewed as a moral triumph. They felt they had learned the lessons of history.
But the problem is the geopolitical environment around them did not share that moral framework.
Exactly. And that brings us to the real shock to the system. The sudden realization that the racetrack they thought they were driving on had actually become a demolition derby.
Right, a car stuck in the driveway isn't very useful when a wildfire is suddenly rushing toward the house.
No, it is not.
And this leads perfectly into the catalyst that forced Germany to finally rewrite these strict laws. The source material points to two massive geopolitical shifts that drove this 700-page overhaul. The first one is obvious, the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Yes. Chancellor Olaf Scholz used the term Zeitenwende, which means a historic turning point. Right. And initially, this was just an economic and military pledge, a massive special fund to rearm the German military, the Bundeswehr. But the Zeitenwende is really a much deeper cultural shock for Germany.
How so?
Well, Germany had built its entire foreign policy on this concept of Wandel durch Handel, change through trade.
Okay, so if we trade with them, they'll become more like us.
Basically. The belief was that if you bind Russia to Europe with deep economic ties, particularly natural gas pipelines like Nord Stream.
Right, the pipeline.
Then you make war economically irrational
Yeah.
and therefore impossible.
But economic interdependence doesn't mean anything to an adversary operating on imperial ambition rather than GDP growth.
Exactly. Putin wasn't looking at a spreadsheet.
And here is the friction point that I think makes this 700-page reform so contentious. The BND, working under those strict, passive, legalistic constraints, fundamentally misread the build-up to the invasion.
They did.
The source notes that German intelligence, along with the French and the Dutch actually, simply did not believe Vladimir Putin would pull the trigger on a full-scale invasion. The US and the UK were shouting from the rooftops that the tanks were going to roll, and Berlin was just skeptical.
Yeah, this intelligence failure is the primary driver for these new powers.
Yeah.
I mean, the BND was looking at the same satellite imagery of Russian tanks on the border as the CIA and MI6.
Right. So why didn't they see it coming?
Because of their legal restrictions.
Yeah.
They lacked the deep, intrusive operational access, the aggressive human intelligence and offensive cyber capabilities to actually verify the intent behind those troop movements.
No.
They were analyzing the puzzle, but they were missing half the pieces.
Okay, I hear that, but I can also hear a skeptical listener raising a very valid objection right now.
Let's hear it.
So if an intelligence agency catastrophically fails to predict the largest land war in Europe since 1945, the instinct in a democracy usually isn't to reward them with unprecedented, sweeping new powers.
Right. Usually someone gets fired.
Exactly. It's to clean house. Why does failing to predict Putin's invasion justify giving the BND the power to conduct sabotage? Or is it exactly because they were flying blind that they need these upgrades?
It's the latter. It's the paradox of intelligence oversight. The argument from the Chancellery and the intelligence chiefs themselves is that the BND failed because they were blindfolded by the parliament.
Okay.
You can't ask an agency to anticipate the actions of a hostile autocratic state if you legally prohibit your own officers from engaging in the kind of aggressive espionage required to penetrate that state's inner circle.
That makes sense. The restrictive laws basically turned the BND into analysts of open source information.
Right, they were just reading the news in passive signals rather than actively gathering secret intent.
And they could get away with that passive stance for decades because of the second catalyst mentioned in our sources. They had the ultimate safety net.
The Americans.
Yes. We need to look at the shifting dynamic with the United States. And just a quick note for our listeners, we are relaying the perspectives documented in the source material regarding the Trump administration and U.S. relations impartially. This isn't us taking a political stance.
Right.
We're just conveying the geopolitical anxieties that drove Berlin's policy shifts based on the reporting.
And from the perspective of the German security establishment, the Trump administration introduced a level of volatility into the transatlantic alliance that they really had never anticipated.
It was a shock to the system.
A huge shock. For the entire post-war period, Germany operated under this core assumption that the U.S. security umbrella, and specifically the intelligence sharing pipeline from the CIA and the NSA, was permanent and unconditional.
So the BND didn't feel they needed a robust, aggressive operational wing because they could just rely on the Americans to do the heavy lifting in the shadows.
Precisely. It was outsourcing the dirty work.
Wow. So Germany could maintain its highly moral, highly legalistic intelligence posture precisely because their American and British partners were willing to get their hands dirty.
Yeah, the U.S. and U.K. were willing to engage in the legally ambiguous kinetic operations required to disrupt terror networks or spy on hostile states. Germany basically enjoyed the intelligence dividends without paying the moral tax.
That is a fascinating way to put it, enjoying the dividends without paying the tax.
But when you have a U.S. administration publicly questioning the value of NATO and suggesting that the security guarantee is transactional, that outsourced model collapses.
The panic in Berlin must have been real.
Oh, absolutely. The leadership suddenly realized that relying on a foreign power for your basic situational awareness is a massive vulnerability.
Sure.
Without guaranteed U.S. backing, Germany's lack of independent operational capability was no longer some moral high ground. It was just a glaring weakness.
So they realized they had to build their own capacity.
Yes. Not just to protect themselves, but to actually bring value to the table in a purely European intelligence network, alongside France, Poland, the UK, just in case the U.S. ever steps back permanently.
Which brings us to the actual text of the reform. The 700 pages designed to tear off the blindfold and take the governor off the Ferrari engine.
Yes, the new draft law.
The source material outlines a staggering expansion of authority, primarily centered around one specific word: kinetic.
That is the key word.
The BND is being granted the power to use kinetic means to counter threats to Germany.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the introduction of the word kinetic fundamentally alters the institutional DNA of the agency. They are transitioning from a service that just gathers information into an organization that executes operations.
Active combatants in the shadow war.
Exactly.
We really need to define kinetic in the context of this draft law because that word usually implies physical force, right? Like a drone strike is kinetic.
Right.
But the source notes that the boundaries of this are going to be fiercely debated in the German parliament, testing those new powers against Germany's pacifist leanings. So let's go back to our opening scenario.
The North Korean missile components on the dock in Hamburg.
Yes. Under this new law, what does a kinetic operation actually look like in that situation?
Well, the draft law explicitly authorizes sabotage and covert interference.
Sabotage?
Yes. So in the Hamburg scenario, the BND officer wouldn't just sit in the van and watch the container anymore. The agency could authorize a clandestine operation to actually intercept the shipment.
So they could actually go down to the dock.
Yeah, they could introduce a corrosive chemical into the fuel valves of the components, or they could alter the microscopic architecture of the guidance chips so that the missile fails catastrophically 30 seconds after launch.
Oh, wow. So they render it useless without blowing it up on the dock.
Exactly. The goal is to degrade, disrupt, or destroy the adversary's capability without leaving any fingerprints.
That is straight out of a James Bond movie. But the source material notes an even more complex legal hurdle when it comes to human intelligence, doesn't it?
Yeah, source operations. This is a huge shift.
Right, because spies, the actual foreign assets recruited by the BND, they often need to do illegal things to get information.
All the time.
Like, if a BND handler recruits a Russian defense contractor, and that contractor needs to steal a laptop from a secure facility in Moscow to get, say, submarine schematics, they are committing a crime.
And historically, the BND was in this completely absurd position regarding this. Because German law binds state employees to strict legal compliance, a BND handler could not legally instruct a source to commit a crime.
Wait, really? Even a minor one? Even in a foreign country?
Not even a minor one. If the source said, hey, I need to break into my boss's apartment to photograph these documents, the handler technically had to say, I cannot authorize you to do that.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You're asking people to betray their countries, committing treason, but you draw the line at petty burglary.
It makes no sense in the real world of espionage.
So how does the 700-page draft fix this? As a listener, you have to wonder, How do you manage a spy network where you are officially authorizing criminality without it spiraling out of control?
Well, the legislation introduces a strict legal framework to officially sanction criminality for intelligence sources.
Okay.
It allows handlers to authorize their assets to commit minor crimes. We're talking burglary, theft, unauthorized data access.
But only if it's necessary.
Right, if those actions are deemed strictly necessary to gather critical national security intelligence. Now, the friction point in Parliament is going to be how you define minor.
I was just going to ask that. Does minor include assault, blackmail?
That's exactly the debate. And the bureaucracy required to write a legal permission slip for a break-in is going to be immense. But fundamentally, it finally brings the BND in line with how MI6 or the CIA operate their human networks.
And this kinetic shift isn't just physical. It's not just breaking into apartments. The digital realm is where this law really shows its teeth.
Yes, the cyber domain.
The concept of the hackback. Currently, if a foreign state-sponsored hacking group penetrates the German power grid, the cybersecurity agencies can patch the vulnerability. They can try to expel the hackers, but it's entirely defensive.
It's just playing whack-a-mole on your own servers.
But under the proposed reform, the BND would be authorized to conduct offensive cyber operations.
Right. If the servers hosting that attack on the German power grid are located in a data center in, say, St. Petersburg, the BND would have the legal mandate to hack into that Russian data center and wipe the servers.
Wow. They can actively destroy the adversary's digital infrastructure.
Offensive cyber sabotage.
And the source points out that this expands beyond just protecting power grids. It goes into protecting the information space itself, disinformation networks.
And this raises a really important question about the boundaries of intelligence work in a democracy.
Definitely.
We've all seen the impact of industrialized disinformation. Troll farms operating out of hostile states, flooding Western social media with coordinated campaigns to manipulate elections, so societal division, all of that.
Right, like what the Internet Research Agency did in Russia.
Exactly. And the U.S. Cyber Command famously ran operations to disrupt them. Well, the new German law contemplates giving the BND similar powers. They could theoretically launch cyber operations to take down the networks of foreign disinformation farms.
I mean, that is a massive escalation in state power. You are giving an agency the authority to decide what constitutes a foreign disinformation network and then handing them the digital weapons to destroy it.
It's a huge responsibility.
But the implementation of all these new powers is severely complicated by the structural reality of the German security apparatus. Because while the BND is getting the ability to act like a military intelligence service, they are fundamentally a civilian agency.
Yes.
And this brings us to a bureaucratic battlefield that honestly sounds like a comedy of errors.
It's known as the German Sonderweg, the special path.
Explain that for us.
Well, almost every major military power on Earth, the United States, France, the UK, they all have an independent, highly resourced military intelligence service that is dedicated entirely to supporting the armed forces.
Like the DIA in the U.S.
Right. Germany does not have that.
So what does the military do?
The military, the Bundeswehr, has a defense intelligence unit, but it is strictly confined to tactical operations.
Okay, meaning what?
Meaning, if a German unit is deployed in a combat zone, the military intelligence unit figures out where the enemy snipers are located on the next ridge. Very immediate tactical stuff.
I see. But what about the big picture?
The strategic intelligence, the broader picture of enemy capabilities, satellite analysis of hostile troop movements, what submarines Russia is building, that is entirely the domain of the BND.
And the BND is a civilian agency reporting directly to the chancellor.
Right. They have roughly 700 former soldiers working within their ranks as analysts to kind of bridge the gap. But the cultural and structural divide is massive.
It's like trying to run a professional kitchen, but the person buying the ingredients and the person cooking the meal work for two different rival restaurant groups, and they communicate via post.
That's a great way to picture it. You have military commanders who need real-time, actionable intelligence to make life-or-death targeting decisions. But they have to route their requests through a civilian bureaucracy that operates on different timelines, with different security clearances, and different institutional priorities.
I want to focus on a specific anecdote from the source material here because it highlights just how baffling this separation of duties is, even to other intelligence professionals. It involves James Clapper.
The former U.S. Director of National Intelligence. It's such a revealing story.
It really is.
So when Clapper visited Germany to meet his counterparts, His itinerary naturally included both the military and civilian intelligence chiefs.
Yeah.
Right. So on the first day of his visit, he meets the head of the Bundeswehr's Defense Intelligence Unit. The German officer shakes his hand and introduces himself, saying, "Hello, I am the German Director of Defense Intelligence."
Okay, totally normal.
But the very next day, Clapper visits the BND headquarters to meet the Deputy Director of the Foreign Intelligence Service. And the BND Deputy Director shakes his hand and says the exact same thing. "Hello, I am the German Director of Defense Intelligence."
Both of them.
Both of them. Clapper, who oversaw this massive, clearly delineated U.S. intelligence community, was understandably confused. He actually noted that he thought he had met that guy yesterday. Both agencies truly believe they hold the mandate for military intelligence.
I mean, in peacetime, that kind of institutional rivalry is just a bureaucratic headache, right? But in the context of the Zeitenwende, in the context of preparing for actual high-intensity conflict on the European continent, it's a critical vulnerability. If a German artillery unit needs the exact GPS coordinates of a Russian command post, the system designed to provide that data cannot be bogged down in a turf war between the Ministry of Defense and the Chancellery.
And the Ministry of Defense recognizes this vulnerability. There is a strong internal push right now within the military establishment to basically break away from the BND's monopoly on strategic intelligence.
They want their own agency.
Yeah, they want to establish a brand new, independent, fully militarized intelligence branch.
But I'm guessing that's not easy.
Not at all. Creating a new secret service in Germany requires immense political capital, especially given the historical aversion we discussed earlier.
Right, the ghosts of the past. So the system is structurally flawed, it's highly compartmentalized, and legally restricted. But despite all of that friction, the BND is not a toothless organization. The source material outlines two specific areas where German intelligence has managed to become a world-class player, effectively creating currency to trade with their allies.
Yes, currency is exactly what it is. In the world of espionage, you only get what you are willing to give. You have to bring something to the table.
And Germany brings raw, unadulterated geography.
Yes. Their primary geopolitical asset is the DECIX node in Frankfurt.
Let's explain the mechanics of this, because I think people forget that the internet isn't just, a magical cloud.
Right, it's physical.
It's physical infrastructure, glass and light.
Yeah.
When you send an email or stream a video, that data travels through massive fiber optic cables that crisscross the globe. And those cables have to intersect at specific physical locations to route the traffic.
Exactly. And DECIX in Frankfurt is the commercial internet exchange point. It is the second largest internet node on the entire planet.
Second largest. After Sao Paulo, right.
Yeah. Yes. A staggering percentage of global data traffic flows through that single physical location in Germany. We are talking about the primary digital arteries connecting Western Europe to Eastern Europe to Russia, the Middle East, and parts of Asia.
It's like panning for gold in a fire hose.
It really is. And the BND has legal access to tap into that node. They can deploy intercept technology to filter and analyze the petabytes of data flowing through Frankfurt every day.
Just to be clear, they aren't looking at domestic German traffic, right?
No. They are using algorithms to sift through international communications, looking for specific selectors, phone numbers, email addresses, encryption signatures that are tied to terrorism, espionage, or weapons proliferation.
And the sheer volume of data the BND can access through Frankfurt makes them an indispensable partner to the NSA in the US and GCHQ in the UK.
Indispensable.
Yeah.
Because the Americans and the British have immense capabilities, obviously, but they don't have sovereign control over the Frankfurt node.
Yeah.
So the BND trades access to that data stream in exchange for the operational intelligence they historically couldn't gather themselves.
So their digital geography is an absolute goldmine. But their other area of expertise is distinctly analog, and it stems directly from their frontline position during the Cold War.
The weapon collectors.
Yes.
Yeah.
The BND has this rich history, almost an institutional obsession, with acquiring and reverse engineering foreign enemy hardware.
This is a direct legacy of operating on the border of the Iron Curtain. The BND developed a highly specialized technical directorate dedicated entirely to tearing apart Soviet technology to understand its vulnerabilities.
And the historical examples provided in the source are just phenomenal studies in intelligence bordering. Like, let's look at the Middle East in the 1960s and 70s.
Right, during the Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War.
The Arab armies were heavily supplied with top-tier Soviet military equipment. And when the Israeli military pushed back those forces, they captured massive stockpiles of Soviet tanks, radar systems, anti-aircraft batteries.
And the BND saw an opportunity. They orchestrated this massive covert cooperation program with Israeli intelligence.
Because Israel had the hardware, but not the time.
Exactly. The Israelis had the captured Soviet gear, but they were fighting a hot war. They lacked the immediate rear echelon industrial capacity to meticulously reverse engineer every single piece of it.
So the BND stepped in.
The BND brought the equipment back to West Germany, analyzed it down to the last bolt, developed electronic countermeasures, and then shared that vital data with both Israel and NATO.
Wow. And they ran the exact same playbook in the 1980s during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, working with regional partners to acquire captured Soviet helicopters and missile systems.
Yep.
But the most surreal twist in this whole history of weapon collecting happened after the Berlin Wall fell.
Oh, this part is amazing.
When East and West Germany reunified, the new democratic government suddenly inherited the entire arsenal of the East German military, the National People's Army.
Mountains of Soviet bloc weaponry. Fighter jets, air defense systems, armored vehicles, just sitting there.
And the BND, recognizing the intelligence value of this stockpile, orchestrated highly classified secret shipments of these leftover East German weapons back to Israel in the early 1990s.
Right, because the Israelis were still facing adversaries armed with Soviet tech. And the BND basically handed them the complete encyclopedia of their enemies' arsenals.
And what's crazy is this expertise isn't locked in the past. Right now, as the war rages in Ukraine, the BND is heavily involved in gathering and analyzing captured Russian drones, electronic warfare systems, and armaments alongside Ukrainian partners.
Direct echoes of their Cold War triumphs.
Yeah.
And their bench of Russia experts is so deep that after the poisoning of Alexander Litvinenko in London...
Why Russian assassins?
All right. The BND actually sent a team to the UK to brief British intelligence. They helped MI6 map out the shifting power dynamics in Moscow, which really surprised the UK.
So we've got an agency that can literally get its hands on North Korean missile tech, reverse engineer Russian drones, and tap into the world's second largest internet node.
They are very capable.
And now, with this 700-page reform, they are finally getting the active, kinetic tools to use that knowledge offensively without having to ask a foreign partner to pull the trigger.
That's the underlying logic of the whole reform.
Which forces us to confront the central overriding anxiety of this entire deep dive. Who is actually watching the watchers?
Oversight.
Right. You're taking an agency with all this access and handing them the legal authority to hack foreign servers, sabotage international shipments, and instruct human sources to break the law. In a democratic society built on the trauma of the Stasi, the oversight mechanisms have to be flawless, right? Or you risk recreating the exact monster the principle of separation was designed to prevent.
Exactly. And that's why the restructuring of oversight is the linchpin of the draft's legislation. Expanding state power requires a commensurate expansion of judicial control.
Okay, so how does it work right now?
The current system for overseeing the intelligence services, particularly regarding domestic wiretaps and surveillance that touches German citizens, relies on a body called the G10 Commission.
The G10. That refers to Article 10 of the German Basic Law, right? The one that guarantees the privacy of correspondence, posts, and telecommunications.
You got it. The commission is designed to authorize any state infringement on that right. But the G10 Commission is fundamentally a political construct.
What do you mean?
It's comprised of honorary members, often former politicians or retired judges who were appointed by the parliament. They meet periodically to review surveillance requests.
So they're basically part-time.
Yes, they are dedicated, but they are part-time.
Yeah.
And the technical complexity of modern intelligence has vastly outpaced their structural capacity. How does a part-time committee of political appointees effectively evaluate the technical necessity of an offensive cyber-sabotage operation?
They can't. They wouldn't even know what they were looking at half the time.
Right. And the source indicates that this commission is effectively being dismantled. Under the new draft law, the G10 Commission will likely be dissolved next year.
Replaced by what?
A vastly expanded Independent Control Council.
The Independent Control Council. How is that different?
Well, this shift represents a real maturation of the oversight framework. The council is not made up of political appointees. It is staffed by professional, fully independent, full-time judges.
Okay, so professional judges instead of politicians.
Exactly. The Federal Constitutional Court essentially mandated this change. They demanded a rigorous, professionalized, and deeply technical judicial review process before the BND can deploy these new James Bond powers.
It's an attempt to balance those powers with ironclad constitutional rights.
Right.
But here is the sociological mystery of this entire process. You have a 700-page document that authorizes state-sponsored hacking, sabotage, and sanctioned criminality. You have the dissolution of a long-standing parliamentary oversight committee. In any other era, you would expect the German public to be marching in the streets.
Oh, absolutely.
You'd expect massive protests from privacy advocates, wall-to-wall media coverage, a fierce societal debate about the balance between security and civil liberties.
But the silence is deafening. The public reaction is virtually non-existent.
How does that happen? How does a democratic society undergo a fundamental rewrite of its intelligence laws while the public just collectively shrugs?
It's a matter of societal bandwidth. The German public is currently exhausted by a cascade of immediate, tangible crises.
Economic stuff.
Mostly, yes. The macroeconomic environment is deeply unsettled. The automotive industry, which is the beating heart of the German export economy, is facing existential threats from international competition and the transition to electric vehicles.
Right. Auto industry struggles are front-page news.
Factories are facing closure. Inflation has eroded purchasing power. Defense spending is dominating the headlines. When the average citizen is profoundly anxious about their paycheck, the cost of heating their home, and the broader deindustrialization of their region, a highly technical debate about foreign intelligence reform simply cannot penetrate the public consciousness.
It's a perfect storm for sweeping legislation. People are understandably worried about their paychecks and the local car factory.
And that means the drafting of this 700-page law has been happening behind closed doors in the ministries for a year and a half. The debate has been completely siloed. It's restricted to security journalists, think tanks, and a handful of specialized politicians. The general public is simply looking the other way. And if we look at the political opposition that does exist within the parliament, the source notes it's highly polarized and largely confined to the fringes of the political spectrum.
It is.
And again, to our listeners, we are relaying the sources reporting on the domestic friction in the Bundestag impartially. We're just outlining the arguments presented by various factions to illustrate the complexity here without validating or endorsing any specific stance.
Understood. And the opposition to the intelligence reform is a fascinating study in political horseshoe theory.
Let's start with the far right.
Okay, on the far right, you have the Alternative for Germany Party, the AfD. Now, the Domestic Intelligence Agency, the BfV, currently monitors factions of the AfD, classifying them as suspected or proven right-wing extremist groups. So they are actively being watched by the intelligence services.
Exactly. Consequently, the AfD vehemently opposes any expansion of intelligence powers. They argue that the agencies are being used as partisan tools by the government to surveil and suppress political opposition. They frequently deploy the rhetoric of the Stasi to describe the domestic intelligence apparatus.
And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have the far-left factions.
Right. And the far-left opposition is rooted in a fundamental ideological distrust of state security forces. They argue that secret intelligence agencies are inherently incompatible with transparency and civil rights.
So they don't even want to reform the spies.
No, their historical position hasn't been to reform them, but to abolish the intelligence services entirely.
So the fringes are pushing back hard, but the political center, the mainstream parties, are driving this legislation forward. And the source points out a really profound irony in how the mainstream political establishment has evolved on this issue over the last 10 years.
The hypocrisy, or perhaps the pragmatic evolution, depending on how you look at it, of the mainstream political class is striking.
Because of Snowden?
Exactly. If you rewind the clock 10 years to the Snowden revelations, many of the exact same politicians who are currently championing this 700-page expansion were the loudest voices demanding strict, suffocating limits on the BND.
Wow.
They were the privacy advocates who built the legalistic cage the agency is currently trapped in.
It's amazing how the reality of hybrid warfare forces ideological flexibility.
It really does.
A decade ago, state-sponsored cyber warfare, or a massive land war in Eastern Europe, felt theoretical to a politician in Berlin. The primary concern was abstract privacy rights. But today, the threat is existential. When Russian hackers are targeting your hospitals and your energy grids, the philosophical debate about the purity of the principle of separation tends to evaporate. Survival dictates policy.
Very well said. But passing the law is only the first step. The BND faces an implementation hurdle that legislation cannot fix. They can rewrite the laws, but they cannot easily rewrite the culture. Germany does not have a cultural romanticization of the spy.
The PR problem.
Yes, a massive PR problem.
Because if you look at the UK, MI6 is deeply embedded in the cultural identity through James Bond. The idea of the sophisticated, rule-breaking British spy acting in defense of the realm, it's a point of national pride.
It is.
And in the U.S., the CIA is mythologized through Jason Bourne, Ethan Hunt, countless thrillers. They're seen as this shadowy but necessary shield of the Republic.
But in Germany, the cultural archetype of the spy is the Stasi informant, or the Gestapo officer. The societal reflex is revulsion. The historical baggage is so heavy that the BND actively rejects the traditional terminology of espionage.
Wait, they don't even use the word for Secret Service?
No. They heavily reject the term Geheimdienst, which translates to Secret Service.
What do they want to be called?
They prefer to be seen as an intelligence gathering service. They want to brand themselves as civil servants who just happen to read classified memos rather than shadow operatives.
But this raises a critical logistical problem. To execute these new kinetic powers, to run sabotage operations, to conduct offensive hackbacks, to manage sources committing authorized crimes, you need operatives.
You do?
You need aggressive, risk-tolerant, highly skilled field agents and cyber specialists. But how do you recruit the best and brightest minds in the country when your entire profession is viewed with inherent suspicion by the society you are trying to protect?
That is the million-dollar question. The cultural shift is arguably harder than the legal one. You have to manufacture a mythos. And the source material highlights that the BND is currently engaged in a desperate, highly unconventional attempt to modernize its public image and drive recruitment.
They're opening the doors to pop culture.
It's a remarkable shift in posture for an organization built on absolute secrecy. The BND has actually begun allowing popular YouTube influencers to enter their heavily fortified Berlin headquarters.
YouTube influencers inside the BND.
Yes. They are permitting these content creators to film inside the facility, to interview staff members, and to broadcast a curated, demystified version of intelligence work to millions of young Germans.
They are trying to normalize the profession for the TikTok generation.
Exactly. And it goes further than social media. The BND is actively supporting a major Netflix production.
Okay, now that is fascinating.
They recognize the power of the prestige television narrative. You know, the French intelligence service, the DGSE, experienced a massive surge in recruitment and public prestige following the global success of the television show, The Bureau.
Oh, I love The Bureau. It made them look so competent and cool.
Right. And the BND wants their own version of The Bureau. They are consulting on a Netflix series featuring former BND officers, leaning into the classic romanticized trope of retired spies being pulled back into the shadows for one last high-stakes mission.
They're trying to build the German James Bond. But history suggests this is an uphill battle, doesn't it? The source mentions a hilarious, basically forgotten attempt to do exactly this back in the 1970s.
Yes, Mr. Dynamite.
Mr. Dynamite. The German film industry tried to create a suave action hero BND officer called Mr. Dynamite.
And it was an absolute box office disaster. It flopped miserably. The German public flatly rejected the premise. They could accept Sean Connery as a British spy with a license to kill. But the idea of a swaggering German intelligence officer casually breaking the rules to save the world, it just triggered all of their historical immune responses.
Imagine a German James Bond, but before he can order a martini, he has to fill out 3 forms in triplicate to prove he isn't acting like the police, and then wait for a panel of retired judges to authorize his wiretap.
Exactly.
No wonder Mr. Dynamite didn't get a sequel. It fundamentally clashes with the principle of separation. It doesn't make for good cinema.
Joking aside, it illustrates the sheer scale of the mountain the BND is trying to climb.
It really does.
The legal shift is imminent. The Constitutional Court has mandated that a new legal framework must be in place by January 1st of next year, meaning Parliament has to push this 700-page document through at breakneck speed. They will get their kinetic powers. But the cultural shift convincing the German public that an aggressive operational intelligence service is a democratic necessity rather than a historical regression that will take generations.
We have covered massive ground today. We started by examining an intelligence apparatus deliberately paralyzed by the traumas of the Gestapo and the Stasi, bound by the rigid principle of separation.
Right.
We traced how the illusion of European peace was shattered by the war in Ukraine, and how the shifting reliability of the U.S. security umbrella forced Berlin to confront its own operational blindness. We unpacked a 700-page legislative earthquake that will grant the BND the power to hack, sabotage, and authorize criminality, transforming them from passive observers into active combatants.
And we explored the surreal reality of this transformation occurring while the German public, burdened by economic anxiety, basically ignores the debate.
The Ferrari is finally having its engine governor removed. It's pulling out of the driveway and onto a very dangerous track.
That's exactly what's happening.
But as we wrap up, we promise to leave you with one final provocative thought. A detail from Florian Flade's reporting that completely reframes everything we've just discussed. For the last hour, we have focused entirely on terrestrial threats. We've talked about Russian tanks on the Ukrainian border, cyber servers in St. Petersburg, fiber optic nodes in Frankfurt, and missile components on a dock in Hamburg.
We've explored how Germany is desperately rushing to update its laws to fight the hybrid ground-level warfare of today.
But the true frontier of intelligence, the ultimate high ground that will dictate the future of global security, isn't on Earth at all. The journalist noted that his current focus is shifting rapidly toward the militarization of space.
Space. The orbit above us is no longer just a pristine environment for scientific satellites.
No, it's not.
Adversaries like Russia and China are actively developing and deploying counterspace measures. They are building the capability to blind, jam, or physically destroy the satellite networks that form the backbone of modern civilization.
Global communication, GPS navigation, military targeting, the synchronization of global financial transactions, it all relies on fragile infrastructure floating in orbit.
Which leaves us with a deeply unsettling question. Germany is tearing up its historical rulebook and rewriting 700 pages of law to empower their spies to fight in the shadows of Europe. But even with all these new kinetic powers, are they simply preparing for yesterday's war?
Right. If the true battlefield has already moved to the stars, is the terrestrial spy agency ready for the darkness of orbit? If the fire is in space, a Ferrari on the ground isn't going to help you put it out.
It certainly isn't.
That is something to mull over next time you look up at the night sky. Thank you to our expert for guiding us through this incredibly complex maze.
It was a pleasure.
And to you, the listener, thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Stay curious, keep questioning the information around you, and we will see you next time.